then recording is started, and then I will just be a minute or so while I'm looking for something to talk about.
Right.
Alright. Alright, firstly, if you don't mind me asking, what sensitivity and DPI do you run on? At least it appears very high.
800 DPI and 5%.
Okay, so that's actually not too high. That's actually, on the lower end of the spectrum. So I just say the aiming feels very wild. Like we kind of come in and we're doing wide kind of swirls with our crosshair, which if you have a lower sensitivity is probably going to be more so just like our arm. So I would say
Yeah.
just be careful about like how much, like there's just a lot of like jarring flicks with it, which we'll see if that affects aim at all in any sense here, but I was just kind of more so commenting on it.
Okay.
Here we kind of swap from target to target to target a lot really fastly, so we come into the fight, right, and we start shooting at the Reaper, and then we swap our attention over to the Baptiste, and then we shoot at the Moira, and then we swap from the Moira over to the Sigma, and then we swap from Sigma back to Bap, and then we swap from
Yeah.
Bap to the Immortality field, and then we're gonna swap from Immortality, Junkrat. We're looking at Junkrat and Moira, and then and then Junkrat obviously jumps on top of us. So, we're constantly shifting our attention here, and really the point that I want to make is that you never want to randomly shift your attention. Your attention should be shifted kind of in two main circumstances. One, when the target that you're shooting at is when you've lost the option, that lost the target. So let's say the target just runs around the corner. Well, you might not be able to chase them, and therefore you give it up, you swap to someone else, right? Sometimes you could chase them and just run around that corner, but sometimes they just get away.
Yeah.
Another example would be if you see a better opportunity. So let's say you're shooting at the Moira, and then all of a sudden you see Junkrat's 1 HP. Well, maybe you might want to swap over to shooting at Junkrat because now Junkrat's an opportunity, or somebody's out of position, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have a lot of different options with that, but the main thing is that you don't want to swap from person to person to person to person for no reason, because then that just means nobody ends up dying. You just kind of tickle everyone. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I do have one question though.
Mm-hmm.
Who should I focus in that situation between Sigma, Bap, and Moira, like when they were at the bottom there?
Yeah. So generally speaking, when it comes to and this is maybe I don't know if we need to go super in depth on target priority as of yet, but that's kind of target priority question of like who should be your priority in terms of who you're targeting.
Yeah.
The generalized answer to that is that you have two things to think through when you're thinking of who do I shoot at, who is the highest value target to kill, who is the easiest to kill. Highest value generally is not necessarily like what's the best role to kill, but some roles have an ability to get burst value in terms of kills. I had a word for it that I just came to like the other day, but I can't recall it. But like think through how, for example, tanks at the moment, because it's a 2-in-1 role, have a lot of burst value potential. Doesn't mean that their role is necessarily any more overall valuable in the game than a support. Same thing with DPS. So they would kind of be the highest value target to kill, but same thing as DPS. DPS can kind of frag out and get like a 3. They can come into a fight,
Yeah.
tap 3 heads and get 3 kills and find very high burst value. Whereas supports might find more value in their consistency and their ability usage, which they're not getting as much, but they're still going to overall be having a lot of value as a role. So this is more so in terms of like burst potential. And therefore tanks are kind of the highest value generally speaking. DPS are second, supports are third, but it's very a very generalized concept there.
Okay.
Nextly is how easy are they to kill, and this is where it flip flops a little bit, where tanks are the hardest things to kill in the game. They have 2 to 3 times the
Yeah.
health of other characters. They have armor. They have shields. They have tanking abilities. They get healed the easiest. So overall, probably not going to want to shoot at them too often. And that's not to say we never shoot at hard
Yeah.
characters. You shoot at them when they're low, out of position, or if they're the only thing you can shoot at. But like we just saw in this circumstance, when you have the equal opportunity to shoot at BAP, Moya, or Sigma, maybe we wouldn't want to be shooting at the Sigma,
Yeah.
just because he's gonna not die. Nextly on the list, though not without its exceptions, comes supports. Supports have more survivability generally than DPS, as they all just received the new role passive of self healing, and also Kiriko, which is a new support who has the highest escape potential out of all the supports. They also buffed Mercy's escape potential. Overall, they're just more difficult generally, but you can find exceptions, like who's generally going to be more difficult to kill, like a Samba or a Zenyatta,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So,
Obviously. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
so therefore, based on all that, generally speaking, your rough priority order in fights is going to be DPS, then supports, then tanks. But this will change if you see opportunities, or if there's certain characters that are super high value targets or things like that.
Yeah, like a
That makes sense.
Pharah on a certain map.
Yeah.
That's just yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So there, we kind of. I'm not sure if we because we peek here and we don't see him. I'm not sure if we maybe thought that he was like hiding on the corner, but he's not up on the high ground anymore. We can even hear that because he's still shooting down there. This is probably where we can go and peek our supports and try to get healing. We could potentially like what right now. Look at their Junkrat's positioning.
Yeah.
The edge here. We can toss down a dynamite. Press I need healing, get healed up by Moya or Brig, potentially get Junkrat as a kill. But then also, we're not really going to be able to flank very effectively if we're 69 HP.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider here. Okay, if we are on this kind of sneaky angle, firstly, be sneaky. Maybe add in a few extra crouches, so that your movement is muted. They are able to know that you're here slower, so you have more time to survive on this angle. Also noting that we turn the corner on the first target who we're picking is Sigma once again.
And crouching completely eliminates the sound of footsteps.
Not completely eliminates it, but it mutes this. It dull. I guess that's a better
Muffles.
sound. Yeah, muffles, dulls. It
Okay.
makes it quieter. So whenever you're trying to be sneaky, you usually want to crouch, and then if you're trying to like be sneaky, but like go, kind of medium speed, you can crouch spam. So crouch, uncrouch, crouch, uncrouch.
Okay.
That's also going to depend on distance away from someone, because obviously the closer you are, the louder you are. So if
Yeah.
you're further away from someone, maybe you can just walk normally. If you're medium distance away, you can crouch on crouch, and then once you get really close to someone, then you crouch.
Okay.
Much better.
Okay. Right now, maybe could be like retaking that high ground. I think that was pretty decent positioning. Probably would give us better angles to work with. Okay. Right now, standing very far out in the open. Good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. If I'm standing right here, smack dab in the middle of the open, then to get behind cover when people are shooting at you, it's gonna take you what? Like, what's the nearest thing? Like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 seconds to get
Yeah.
behind this, and then in that time you died. Whereas if we're standing near it, doing something like this, well, now we can just instantly duck behind it, right? So there's cover all over the place. We can, and now it takes us half a second, and they now can no longer shoot at us. Cover, you can find cover in doorways, in random objects sitting around, in corners, walls. High ground, all access natural cover. That's part of why high ground's fantastic, is Sigma can see you. Now Sigma can't see you, right? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. That's part of why high ground's great, not all of it. But overall, make sure you're using cover, because then we don't die there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably want to be taking high ground as of the moment. So in terms of high ground, let's discuss high ground real quick. Just to get all the most of the advantages out of the way. High ground on top of all acting as natural cover, at least most of high ground next is natural cover. On top of that, most characters can't reach you very easily. 2/3 of the characters in the game need to take the stairs. That takes longer. The characters that can reach you need to use abilities. Overall, it's just harder to get to you, which adds to survivability. And then also, you have a lot more visibility, right? So note, for example, the difference between being up here, where we can see their high ground, their low ground, all of this point, our high ground, back over
Yeah.
here, this high ground. Whereas if we're down here, okay, well, we have this, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's big difference in terms of visibility as well. The other thing here, just noting in case we're maybe thinking we should be pushing cart with, because, more people on cart, faster it moves. Generally speaking, you only ever need one person on cart to be pushing cart at any given moment, unless you are really close to the end and you think you can cap point before they can touch, then you can put more people on. But when you're pushing cart through normally, no matter what, it's going to be, roughly speaking, 2 fights per point. So you're going to have the first fight, which happens around this bend or so. Then the second fight, which happens around this bend or so. Second point, this applies to all payload maps, right? First fight happens maybe around this bend or that bend. And then second fight happens near the end of the point. First fight happens maybe around this bend or so, and then last fight happens on point, right? When you're about to cap.
Yeah.
It's, roughly speaking, 2 fights per point. This does not change whether or not you have 1 person on cart or 3 people on cart. But, oh, excuse me, I have to cough here. Sorry, I'm getting over cold at the moment.
It's okay.
When I talk fast, my throat gets tickly. But if you stagger the enemy team, that can reduce the number of fights you need. Or if you lose fights, of course, that means you'll need more fights. But does that
What do you
all
mean
that
by
make sense?
stagger the enemy team?
Yeah, so you're a little bit newer to the game. Are you familiar with that terminology or not really?
Nah, I've
No.
heard it, but I don't know really what it means.
Oh, all good. Staggering is essentially dying late. So when you or other people are dying late, it's really bad, because when you die late, the rest of your team has a couple different options. They're all respawned, they're ready to go. Either A, they go in without you, in which case now your team's pushing in at a disadvantage or are more likely to lose the fight they're going into. B, they could wait for you, in which case you waste a bunch of time, and that's also not great. Then
Yeah.
C, on the other thing, is that you could start a stagger train, which is essentially you die and you stagger yourself and die. Then one of your teammates goes in alone and dies, and then 2 teammates go in alone and die, and it just keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah.
And
Been in
that's
that.
yeah, exactly. So generally speaking, we don't want to stagger ourselves, but you do want to stagger the enemy team. It's good when it happens to them, not good when it happens to you.
Okay.
So if it is happening to them, that's a situation where you might not need 2 whole fights. You might need less than that.
Okay.
Yep. Uh-oh. So once again, being a high ground there probably helps. We also had these people walking around up above us, and it seems like we kind of heard them here because we look up, but then we kind of turn and put our attention on a Reaper. We maybe could have dynamited them here or kind of looked at them a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
She's gonna blow.
Okay, once again, probably should be taking high ground. In terms of Bob usage, generally speaking, Bob. Now they are trapped in that room here. That's pretty decent. Because it does isolate them. So that's actually a pretty decent Bob because I think they're also in bad positioning here. Though I will still note, generally speaking, you want to send Bob kind of behind or to the side of their team, because then that creates a lot of pressure on them from behind. It distracts and kind of makes it so that their team is split in where they're sending their resources.
Yeah.
You get a lot of damage in from where they're not really looking and they can't run away if Bob is behind them. Where they're going to run to you, right? That's the sort of thing as
Yeah.
well. So that's a whole lot of reasons, but this is still pretty decent Bob. I like that we're using it early and not holding on to it.
Does Bob just keep running until he hits a wall, or does he stop eventually?
It's until he hits a wall or an enemy.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't really know where to throw it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Besides the payload,
Yeah.
still be in front. Though.
You could probably he probably could have gotten stuck if you angle him to the side. He probably would have gotten stuck on the wall at some point here because it's kind of rigid. That room. This is not positioning you'd see like anywhere.
Yeah.
I'd probably say above plat or so, like maybe mid plat or so. But yeah, in any case, pretty solid Bob.
Enough, Bob.
Fall in vain. 60 seconds.
Let me. Count 'em up.
Okay, make sure when you're low that you request healing. That will not just alert the supports that you do need healing, but also will let them know where from you need healing, and will get you healed generally faster. That way we're not sitting at this HP.
Yeah.
Good shots. Dynamite pretty much off cooldown. There we go. I think generally been pretty okay with it. I'll go over maybe a tech that we can use in a moment. They could maybe help us hit it a bit better and more consistently. But generally, you just want to use it as often as you get it so that it's out there doing things. I think if you threw it over that left side, that gets BAP 2 and probably ends up a
Yeah.
little bit closer to them. But right side's okay. Okay, I'm noticing that oftentimes, I guess, yeah. Well, let's exit out here. Go over a couple minor things here, minor techie things. Oftentimes I'm noticing we'll end up running out of ammo during a fight, so just make sure that we're sneaking in reloads any chance we get. Ashe's reload takes about like a quarter second, right? Like it's not long at all, so you can do things like this where let's say you go pang, you reposition for half a second, and you just reloaded 2 bullets while you're repositioning.
Yeah.
Right, where you're basically anytime you have the slightest little lull in time, you're reloading during the fight, and you just sneak them in there. You generally do this with all reloads, where you reload every time you get the chance, but it's important on Ashe because if you wait until you get to 12, it's such a long time to
Yeah.
get back, but the upside is that it's very short to where you can fit it in very frequently. So rather than waiting to do one long reload, you want to do a bunch of tiny little minor reloads throughout the fight. That way you can just have it constantly up. Besides that, Dynamite, I think we've been hitting semi-consistently. Not sure if you're aware of that. I've maybe seen you going for this tech, but just so you're aware that this tech exists, if you throw Dynamite, as long as they're close to you, you don't need, or medium distance away, you don't need to move your crosshair at all. You can just keep your crosshair still and just shoot the Dynamite as it falls into the crosshair. And that way it's just a much easier shot to land. Now, of course, if there's a bunch of people staring at you, or this is a longer distance Dynamite, I would not recommend standing still for long periods of time, so just be careful when using it. But same thing would apply, is that just keep, even if you're 80 strafing, keep your crosshair in the same spot as where you threw it, and then that way you're able to hit it better than I did there. But that you're able to hit it effectively if you're just keeping it in the same spot and you don't need to track it. The further away you throw it, then it will have a downwards arc, so you will need to kind of adjust slightly. So if we're throwing it up there, the further away we go, we will have to travel down a little bit, but you're never going to need to look left and right. Unless you're moving left or right. So that just keeps it relatively simple. That's about it for the moment.
And another thing with Ashe, does her, like, when you ADS, does it do more damage, or is it the same as?
Yes, much more damage.
Okay.
So take a look at difference between left click and right click. Left click, right click.
Okay, yeah.
Left click, right click.
I figured. I just wasn't sure.
Yep. So generally speaking, right click is scoped shots are a much bigger bang for your buck. The only time you'd ever want to do this is if something is right on top of you, in which case scoping in might make it hard to hit shots, and it's going to make you easier to shoot. So when people are on top of you, when you are like a close to medium range away and you're trying to finish off a kill, so if you tap like that, you can finish them off with a quick shot. Rather than this, you could do this, but it sometimes it can be a little bit faster and easier to follow up with it.
I never thought of that. It's good.
And yeah, that's generally what it's used for, is if people are on top of you or low or both, generally.
Okay.
Arriving at Watchpoint Gibraltar, ready for battle. Double kill.
She's gonna blow. Let me help you with that.
Oh.
Yeah, I
make sure hitting our shots on those AFK characters, right?
Yeah.
All right. So how do you tell whether or not you've won or lost fights? This generally will come down to watching kill feed. I also would recommend sound settings wise. And there's maybe sometimes as well where I'm noticing we're not really detecting some sounds, so I'll go through a couple sound settings. Firstly, just make sure volume is loud enough. That's very subjective. It depends on your system sounds. Music volume should be either off or low so that it's not cluttering with your audio. Then besides that, just check your headset settings outside of game to see if you have surround sound enabled. And if it's not an option, then come and there's an in-game option in spatial audio. There is Dolby Atmos for headphones, which is the in-game version of surround sound. And then also, I might recommend sounds to enable play sound when enemy is eliminated and play sound when teammate is eliminated, to turn those both on. These will give you little ping sounds whenever an enemy or teammate are eliminated. They are different in pitch from each other, so they're not the exact same. And they also will differ in pitch as you progressively have more enemies eliminated or more teammates eliminated. It'll be a different sound. So this is essentially like an audio version of the kill feed. But kill feed is still very handy because it not only tells you if you even if you miss the audio cues, it shows you. It's another source of info. It tells you who's alive, who's dead. It's more specifically to characters. But back to generally speaking, how do you tell whether or not you've won or lost a fight? You tell that by watching kill feed or listening to the audio. If you are up or down 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage or a disadvantage. In which case, you play more aggro if you're winning, you play more passive if you're losing. If you are up or down 2 to 3 people, that is a won fight or a lost fight. If you've won the fight, you get extra aggro. If you've lost the fight, you get out if you can. If you can't, you let them kill you. That's so that you don't stagger yourself. And then you also don't use ultimates in won or lost fights. So as of the current moment, right, if we're retaking a look at this,
Yeah.
maybe not the fight to be taking. Now, currently it's a 2v3, but they have much closer spawns than us, and they're about to get Sigma back.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew as soon as I placed the bob, I was like, I messed up.
Yep.
I looked around, I saw no one, so I was like, fuck.
Rally to me. She's gonna blow.
Hey, great dynamite. Good shots. Yeah, I like the reposition. We got a bit closer. May talk about range in a minute.
My coals are red. Cover the payload. We're moving out. Fire in the hole.
Yeah, so there, Bap, we kind of let Bap get away for free. So we kind of looked at Bap for a minute, but then we kind of just let him sit back there. Whereas we probably could have pushed him, like, gone over, coach gunned up, and just gone and secured the kill. And this would stop you from having to worry about him once this fight is getting a little bit more progressed. So that probably be a good idea to get rid of him. Because even now we're kind of ignoring him, and then now our team's kind of distracted, and we end up dying. Good shots.
Take it easy.
Now at this point, Bap
Yeah.
is dead. Right. So we want to make sure that we are watching kill feed, because at one point does he die? Bap dies right about now, right? So kill feed. Just make sure we're watching that and whatnot, and we can hear it. We can, we'll hear the little ping sound. So just make sure being aware of our surroundings, paying attention, because that kind of stops us from going on this like wild goose chase over
Yeah.
here. All right. Interesting. We didn't go for the dynamite. I like that. A lot of people are in the bad habit of going for it, even though it's not next to anybody.
Yeah.
All right. At this point, that's a pretty solid bob.
Yeah.
They could have easily gone in the room, but decently solid placement. We don't have to go into the nitty gritty of it.
Can't handle the heat.
Probably want to take high ground right about now. Just can coach gun up very easily. High ground, cover, right? So positioning, both of which could have saved us here if we're using cover, if we're taking high ground. That saves us from coalescence. All right, so we're gonna leave here and we're gonna go over two different things. So, question outside of Overwatch, do you have other FPS experience?
Valorant.
Valorant,
Basically.
okay. So
Yeah.
then you're probably familiar with the concept of crosshair placement, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
so just make sure that you're still applying that in Overwatch 2 because it has a very similar effect in this game. It's not as important. It's still an important factor. I wouldn't say that it's as overbearing. It's not like its own thing like in Valorant, whereas in Valorant it's really super important to have good crosshair
Yeah,
placement. In this game it's still important, just not as potent as that. Whereas I feel like we could have some better crosshair placement. Whereas we're just angling, we're just a little bit too low on people. So the main thing I'd say is aim up to head level, headshots. Look at the difference between headshots, body shots. We're gonna
yeah,
be most characters it's 2 times damage, so we're doing 2 times damage if we're hitting headshots versus body shots. That's really important, so you want to make sure we're walking around aiming for body level up to head level. If you're from Valorant, I don't think I need to explain too much on this. Also pre-aim where you know people are going to be, right, all that jazz.
yeah,
Adjust for now most characters are going to be at the same head height, but you might need to adjust up for tanks and maybe down on Torb. And then if people are on slopes or on high grounds, we'll need to adjust. So here these guys are on a slope, so we still want to come around this corner, kind of already aiming at that head height, so that's very little adjustment for us when we go to shoot at them. So just keep in mind crosshair placement.
yeah.
Generally decent. Could be a little bit better. Next, let's talk about ranging. So this is going to be a little bit different per character.
Have a nice
But
day.
Ashe, what would you say generally? What range is Ashe as a character?
I'd say she's just in front of the support, but not too close to the tank. I'd say just like
Yeah, the way
probably the range from the bots you are on the right now. Like,
these bots, yeah.
yeah, like those.
Yeah, generally speaking, I would say it's about mid-range, maybe longer end of a mid-range in comparison to other characters, but she's not long-ranged. So let's define that a little bit. Firstly, close range. Usually close range is about like 15 meters closer, maybe 20 meters, but 15 close.
Yeah,
We don't want to do this because other characters do this much better than us, right? So think Reaper, Mei, Reinhardt, Junkrat, etc. There's a
yeah,
lot of characters that do it better, so there's no reason why we'd put ourselves on top of people. But that's not gonna, there's going to be circumstances like this. This is not going to exclude any and all circumstances. Sometimes it might even be a decent idea to get this close on somebody, depending on the circumstance. So starting range probably on Ashe is going to be about 15 meters, right? Roughly speaking.
okay.
That's like the closest you'll want to get. Maybe more like 20 meters, something between that. But then you also want to be careful about going too far away from people because then you start running into problems. Firstly, you have what you call fall off damage. So notice how we can do up here. We can do 1, 2, 3 shots to kill. We back up a little bit, and now we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4 shots to kill. And then we back up further, and we come back here. Let's see how much this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Okay.
8. A lot less damage. So you want to be careful of that. Also, the further away you go, the smaller the target. Smaller targets are. This is gonna be much harder to hit than this
Yeah.
is, right? Smaller targets harder to hit. And also dynamites are going to be harder to hit because it's a projectile, so it's just going to be more difficult to land the further away you're going from people. Maybe a little bit harder to place Bob if you have Bob. If we're like trying to place Bob from back here, right? It's maybe not going to be the easiest
Yeah.
thing. So overall, Ashe probably wants to cap out at about probably say about like 35 meters, which is roughly this. That's where it turns from 1, 2, 3, 4 shots to, if we back up a little bit, I think this is now gonna be like 5 shots. 1, 2, 3. No, it's still 4 shots, but at the same time, now you're just getting too far away to be able to
Yeah.
effectively do things. If you go back to 40 meters, 1, 2, 3, 4, still 4. I'd still probably say this, especially because of the preference in being closer to them. So I would say
Yeah.
about 15 to 35, maybe 40. And then once again, it's okay if you're forced to be further, but it's not where you want to be. And I think a lot of times in your gameplay, not all the time, but I think there's a decent amount of times where we're just putting ourselves too far away.
Yeah.
Where you're not, where we'll just kind of tickle them down because of how far away we're positioning.
Arriving at watch point Gibraltar.
Surrender.
So this is like where it's, seeing maybe some of the crosshair placement stuff, how we're aiming a bit low on soldier and stuff like that, and like this kind of whole engagement was a little bit like that.
Yeah.
A little bit too close here. So like, look at how. Firstly, we're kind of a little bit off on our own from our team. Also, our whole team's dead. Maybe want to be backing out. So a little too close in this engagement, and then we dead.
Yeah. I also feel very claustrophobic because I don't know the map that much yet, so I don't know where to go around and all that. So
Generally, cover, high grounds, and then try to find that medium distance. That's just kind of, you don't necessarily need to know. It's, of course, very helpful to know the maps, but if you're just looking to keep some of those principles, that's going to get you a long way because you don't need to know the map to know, oh, that's a high ground.
yeah.
Don't go to high grounds that are nowhere near the fight or that are super, putting you in a super bad position, right, like super far away from your team, things like that. But high ground's good, cover's good, keep it within your range, and that's just gonna all of a sudden just be gonna help out with your positioning a lot.
Ready. 5,
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming.
I would maybe open up with an early dynamite. That's pretty much on most maps. If you're defending, you'll be able to open up with an early dynamite, but you can chuck a dynamite so that it's exploding right as the doors open. Just look at how much chunky, not only damage, but also ult charge is going to get you if you're hitting like 3, 4 people with that as they're walking out. Might even be able to get a kill out of it.
True.
She's gonna blow. Tell the devil I said.
Nice kill. Yeah, I don't know why Bash is standing still, but we got him. Peek for heals, watch your health bar. Okay. Noticing, just generally speaking, this goes back to like at the very start where it's talking about how like we're maybe it looked as though we have a high sensitivity. I think that's just because we have a little bit of a flicky aim style. And generally speaking, flicking is not a bad thing, and it's not that flicking or tracking is better than the other. It's like, but what it is that both of them are useful in different scenarios and different circumstances, and it's important to know in which circumstances they are useful and which they aren't. Flicking, generally speaking, is just when your crosshair travels from point A to point B very fast. And your crosshair will need to do that when it's a fast-moving character. So let's say Tracer's blinking around you. Well, now you have to flick to be able to keep up with her. Otherwise, it's just not really humanly possible to be able to track if she's blinking 360s around you. Then you could also think like if someone sneaks up behind you have to flick around really fast. Or let's say we kill the Bastion and now we're flicking to the next person to shoot, which is like top right. Right, we're flicking whenever a crosshair needs to go somewhere. But then when our crosshair is like already on top of somebody and they don't have a movement ability that they're using, Well, then we don't really need to do a big flick. Maybe we can do like micro flicks where we're doing a tiny little flick. For example, we're trying to like go up to their head. That's something we can do. But if we're doing more medium-sized flicks or large flicks, that can just even throw off our aim where we're going too far past the person. Which, let's see if we can maybe spot this a little bit on the Baptiste. But we swap over to Baptiste. And we go. Notice how we did that a little bit on Moira, where we were on the right side of Moira. We go to the left side of Moira.
Yeah.
We're on the BAP. We go. We shoot at BAP. We adjust down. Okay. We're on the right side of BAP. We flick to the left, and then readjust back to the right. We're on BAP. We're on the left side of him. We go on top of him, and then at the last second notice that really sharp flick to the right, and that
Yeah.
throws off our shot. And then we're on the left side of him. That one was normal. Left side of him, little bit of a flick, and then a little bit of an over adjustment. So a lot of over adjusted missed shots. So we're going past the person. So I just say be careful about the flicks when there's not a reason to flick. Just track them or do
Yeah.
more micro flicks to make sure you're not doing these large ones that are going past the person. That all makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's because the game before I was trying to track a lot more and I
Mhm.
was having issues, so
Yeah.
I was trying to flick in more in this game.
Yeah, I just say just look to try to find that balance of when
Yeah.
it's useful, when it's not. Once again, running out of ammo. Good dynamite. Watch standing still. That right there is what is going to happen if you stand still. You only stand still ever if you know for certain that you're not going to get that nobody really knows where you're at. So maybe if you're like coming up on a flank and you're being super sneaky, and then even then, as soon as you start shooting at them, now they know where you're at.
Yeah.
Or if you're like super uber defended, like maybe if like a Lucio just beat it or something like that. Um, but you just want to be really careful about standing still, especially for extended periods of time, because you're going to get headshot super easily. So that's actually what primarily kills us there. Also, I think we've had a lot of preventable deaths, not an overabundance of deaths, but deaths that we could have just where we could have just not died had we done something to prevent it. What would you say, and probably already mentioned a couple of them, but what would you say are generally reasons why people die?
No cover.
Yep. Poor positioning.
Uh, yeah, probably no cover.
Yep.
No high ground. Like,
Yep, that's definitely a big one. It's probably one of the primary ones. You also have, like we just talked about, this one's more minor, but you have poor movement sometimes. Misuse of abilities. On Ashe, you're not going to have that as much as some other characters, but maybe if you waste your coach gun and then you don't have coach gun to escape a dangerous situation, or if you accidentally dynamite yourself or something like that, or you miss dynamite in a duel. Then you have overaggression, such as like if you run into their team. I haven't really seen you doing that one too much, so that one I wouldn't worry about those last two, especially for your Ashe gameplay. And then final one I would say is lack of awareness, as in maybe not noticing that soldiers shooting at us until we're already dead,
yeah.
right? So keeping your ears open, keeping your eyes open, making sure we're not tunnel visioning on what you're shooting at, and then looking to react a bit faster to these circumstances. Generally speaking, I think awareness has been a little bit on the lower side. Partially, it's going to be because we're newer, getting back into the game. Also, we just want to, like I said before, keep our eyes open. And since we're coming towards the end of the session, why don't we review a bit of application? Because especially something like awareness, a lot of times I feel like, especially even to me when I first started coaching, it just seems like a very vague concept. Like, how do I get better at just looking?
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem like concrete. So let's go over application of how do you apply things, generally speaking. You do that by focusing on the things that you're trying to work on. That means that you're going to come into games, you're not going to autopilot. Contrary to popular belief, you're not going to purely play to win because that just leads to stagnation, but you're going to play to improve, and that leads to more winning. what that will actually look like within your game is you're going to come in, you're going to have something on your mind, and you're going to think to yourself something along the lines of awareness, 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 listen, 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 kill feed, kill feed. And because you're giving yourself those self-reminders so frequently, now your awareness is probably going to be better than if you weren't thinking about it at all.
Yeah, it'll be a habit.
Exactly. And that's when it forms into a habit, is when you repeat it, when you continuously do that. And then once it forms as a habit, you no longer need to really think about it as much. It just comes naturally. And then you can look to work on something else. Last thing I'll say on that is just don't try to do everything all at once, just because that will get overwhelming. Pick out a category or 1 to 3 things within a category, and we'll go over those near the end of the session in a few minutes. Make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Coming out on low ground. Also, if they push forwards here, we're probably just dead. I mean, we could coach gun up the high ground, but there's also not really a reason to be kind of off on our own here. Now, let's say we just coach gun like up here real quick. Well, then this is probably pretty fine, because look, they're all on the low ground. If they do come high ground, we have both of our teammates over here to help us out. So this would probably be a much better thing if we're on the high ground, but being on the low ground is maybe a little bit more dangerous. Okay, so we do go up the high ground, but it'd probably just be a lot faster if we just coach gunned it. No reason to kind of
Yeah.
slowly walk around. Initial target, we start on Sigma boat. That was good. We do swap the Bastion. But is Bastion the second, or is he the easiest on their team to kill?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Yeah, maybe he's like the second hardest thing to kill, right?
Yeah.
Just not being able to headshot him very easily while he's turreting, and more health, armor, things like that, right? So, probably if we have the, it's just going to take us an extra half second to swap to Moira, or even to a different target like Baptiste. Easier without the fade, and then if he does use lamp, he doesn't have lamp right now. If he did have lamp, then that baits out a big ability.
Yeah.
Oh, we saw. I don't know. I think we might have accidentally hit Moira in the head, but we hit Moira in the head. And then Moira fades away, but then instead of looking to chase,
Yeah.
we probably could have pretty easily like just peeked right next to the edge and tossed down a dynamite, or very potentially even dropped and then just shot her and then coached back up, something like that.
Yeah.
But that one, if you did that one, you'd have to make awareness.
Yeah. My awareness is definitely needs to be worked on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's a easy fix of a death if we're listening. Also, just going like, oh yeah, soldier's not in the fight. Like, where the heck is soldier at? Right, thinking through stuff like that. Okay. Notice a little bit of the range that we're putting ourselves at there to kind of start the fight out, and then Sigma pushes closer to us, but we're starting out at the kind of that longer range. Let's see where does Bob go here. Okay. All right, so I think Bob, honestly, not too shabby on the Bob usage.
Bob, do something. No sweat off my brow. She's gonna blow.
Okay, probably want to be repositioning up on a high ground. I would probably, what I would do, utilize Coach Gun so much more than you are in terms of mobility, because what we can probably do is start off on this high ground. This means that we're A, closer to start off. B, we can just stay here and see them if they come top right. This helps scout for our team. If they do come up top right and they start contesting us, Coach Gun, we're over on this high ground now, right?
Yeah.
So, and then if they come down here, this probably gets us some better angles if we're right here. The other benefit of high ground is that it gives us angles above and around shields and things like that, which is what you call off angling, when we can take an easy option to get around shields. Makes sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's review, go do a quick review, wrap up the session, and go over the main points. Ability usage. I would say utilize Coach Gun much more. I think we hold on to it a lot, and we could be, especially for in terms of mobility, there's a lot more high grounds and different positioning we could take with it that we don't really use it for. Dynamite, I think you have pretty solid usage over. Maybe once in a while we'll hold on to it for a second, or we'll miss it. Just make sure you're trying to hit it. Right?
Yeah.
Just working on a little bit of accuracy with it. But overall, ability usage probably like a low to medium priority for you to work on. Hopefully it shouldn't be like too difficult to implement Coach Gun usage. So like once we just start thinking about it, hopefully it's just as simple as, okay, I'm gonna press the button now. So that's why I'd probably put on the lower end of things. Maybe
Yeah.
like, yeah.
That was also like my 5th game with the Ashe, so still pretty new to her kit. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Bob usage, pretty solid. Not too many issues with it. Try to put it behind them, put it to the side of them. I liked that we used it in good timing. We used it at the start of fights, which is usually a great idea. We didn't hold on to Bob. And then final thing was just make sure you're not ulting in won or lost fights. There's like that one ult, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Overall, that was probably even lower. That probably went to, let's say that one was like a low to medium, and then ability usage maybe like higher end of that, possibly lower end of medium, something like that. Then we have your mechanics. You have crosshair placement, aim it up a little bit more, head level, aim where you know people are going to be, adjust a little bit for different characters. Besides that, flick when needed, don't flick when not, track when not. Do micro flicks. Micro flick would be like that, right? But don't do these wide arcing flicks or going off the person if it's not needed. So if they're not moving fast, if they're not sneaking up behind you, etc. Besides that, target priorities. So who should you be shooting at? Two biggest things are easy to kill, highest value to kill. Highest value in terms of burst potential is usually tank, DPS, support. Hardest to kill is usually going to be or I guess easiest to hardest is going to be DPS, support, tank. DPS and supports being a little bit closer together with a few intertwined. Tank, almost every tank is harder than like the next DPS or the next support, right?
Yeah.
Tank's kind of the next tier up. But you do adjust on that if you have opportunities or if you don't really have another option. I think that is mainly it. Left click only really if, unscope shots if you're finishing off targets, because from back here it can be a little bit inaccurate. I think the first shot's accurate, and then after that you're going to start to have spread, where now I'm doing this, notice how little shots are hitting.
That's good to know.
So that's why you don't necessarily want to use it to try to finish off targets from super far away. But more close to medium, you can use it to finish off a target, or if somebody's on top of you, use it. Overall, that category is a bit bigger. That one probably goes to about maybe like higher end of medium or so. I'd say probably one of the bigger ones in there being target priority, just thinking through that. Or even maybe just a normal medium, somewhere between that. Then we have your positioning. Positioning, make sure we're using cover. Good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. Take high grounds. High grounds are fantastic. Take them much more often. Take ones that are closer to the fight. Besides that, also range, right? Roughly speaking, 15 to 35 is your rough range, medium ranged character. don't go too far, which is like kind of what we're in a little bit of a habit of doing. And then overall, that one was probably going to be like
Tell the devil I said hi.
medium high, maybe lower end of medium high. And then we have your awareness. Awareness, pay attention to your surroundings. Press I need healing when you're low. Make sure that you're just keeping your ears open, listening to things. Keep your eyes open. Watch kill feed. 1 to 2 is an advantage or disadvantage.
That one's on the
2 to
house.
3 is a won or lost fight. Go more aggro if you're winning. More passive if you're losing. If you've lost, get out if you can. If you can't, let them kill you. Don't stagger. And then also, and then don't use ults in won or lost fights. Overall, like there's probably a couple other odds and ends there, but overall awareness, probably came out
They never
to
learn.
like also like a lower end of medium high. And then also we minorly touched on survivability as well. Make sure you're looking to stay alive. That will primarily, I'd say the two main things for you was positioning and awareness, and then also a touch of movement, but that wasn't too much. Make sure you are moving.
I do have one question about like let's say we kill a whole team, and then we're pushing the payload. Do I want to push up as a DPS and try and like, get more picks as they're coming out of spawn, or do I want to stay with the payload, like stay on
Sorry.
pace with the payload?
Alright, sorry, apologies. I had a little something come in the room. So you just asked if you've won the fight, do you push forwards to try to get staggers? Is that your question, or push forwards to try to get
Yeah.
picks for the next fight?
It
Yep,
picks for the next fight too. Yeah.
yep. Just as long as you're not going too far to where you'll die.
Better get
Yeah,
digging, bud.
Okay.
that'd be perfectly fine. Just be careful is the only thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So to put that all in order, number 1, it probably I'd say comes out to positioning. Number 2, awareness. 3, mechanics. Then after that, it dropped off significantly, and then 4, I would say ability usage, and then 5 ult usage. Any questions?
Right on schedule.
No, I think that's about it. It's pretty good lesson.
All right.